Awesome, you guys. Those are really, really good examples. I was thinking of one last night. You know how Russ said to drive 15 down the hill? Well, he said that for like 10 years, you know? Mm-hmm. And I thought, because he put speed bumps way down, you know, where the speed bumps are, I thought those were the people that got mad. And so, you know, I would slow down before I got to there and then go 15 and then speed up. Okay, well, apparently that's not the guy. It's like right here, you know, because not yesterday, the day before, I'm driving by, and I'm not going that fast, it's like 20, you know, and I hear some honking, and I was thinking, I wonder what that is, you know, and I just keep going. Yesterday, I drive by, and the window's down, the kids are like screaming, and I'm going 20, so I'm like I hear this person scream, like, slow down, like, oh, and I look over, and I'm like, that must be the mean man, and I just was so mad. I just got so mad. It was like, I am going 20. You're not the boss of this road. Like, I have kids in the car, you know, and all of this like justification of like, how dare you tell me to slow down? Like, who do you think you are? And you're just a grumpy old man. And like, it just kept going of like, I want to tell him, like, I want to stop and go back there and tell him. So there's all the bad, and it's like all I could see is this guy, and he's bad. He is all bad. He's mean. He comes up here and he tells everyone to slow down just because he doesn't want to wash his windows, and like, you know. Yeah. So some good that comes out of that is it exposes my heart, you know, of this like, how dare you, and this like offense, you know, that's so offended over it's really, just really slow down. It's only 5 miles per hour, you know, but it exposes like a blame shifting, and so how good that's a good that it draws me and points me to Jesus, you know, that this other person's grumpiness and this other person's whatever that he has, you know, points me to like, oh, wait a minute, like I need Jesus, you know, like it's not just him and all the things he needs to fix so he can be a good neighbor. It's like, well, what kind of neighbor is that I'm so quick to be defensive rather than quick to be like, oh man, I shouldn't have been going 20, you know. So, you know, we live in this world and nothing is all good and nothing is all bad except for God and Satan, right? That's it. Everything else that we experience, whether it be ourselves, other people, or the experiences we have, it will not be all good and it will not be all bad. And it's this big deal that our hearts and minds need to get wrapped around because it hurts us if we don't. If we try to keep them separate, it leads to lots of things like perfectionism, like not being able to accept the bad, you know, of wanting everything to be just perfect in what other people do and what we do and whatever we're involved in our relationships, our hobbies, our feelings. It's just this demand of pre-fall existence, right? That just it's not there right now. It will be in heaven, but it's not right now. So there's perfectionism. There's also the opposite of idealism, of an inability to see bad, which could be very harmful in relationships. If you see this person you're dating, they are all good, they're just so awesome, and you can't see any of the flaws, that's really dangerous as well. And sometimes that happens with spiritual leaders or any sort of leader, that they're larger than life and they're on this platform and they could do nothing wrong, and then all of a sudden when they do, it's just like a punch to the gut of like, oh, my whole world is crashing down because they were all good and now they're all bad. It also leads to depression, excessive moodiness, self-image problems, anxiety and panic, eating and substance problems, narcissism, guilt, addiction, broken relationships, excessive rage, and having an I'm all bad or they're all bad or I'm all good and they're all good mentality. And not only like all those inward things do we experience, but it's also our relationships with others are hurt and harmed. And it affects the course of our life. Because say if you start a job or a marriage or a class or a major or a ministry or roommates or whatever, and you go into it thinking this is going to be all good, then what happens when it's not all good? You run, book it, get out of there, you isolate yourself, or you throw a temper tantrum, So, none of those are good things. So it really can affect the course of our life when we don't have a good-bad split, a healthy good-bad split. So where does it come from? Where does this disconnect of not being able to have the good and the bad together? It comes from nature and nurture. So if you think about the fall, the very beginning, Adam and Eve wanted to be like God, right? That's the same exact desire to be more than we are, is what's coming out. We're born under the law. We have a fallen conscience that actually punishes us, our mind, our conscience punishes us for not measuring up to the law. But then we also bring in nurture, that we are actually nurtured by imperfect people, right? So when my kids sin, my natural reaction isn't to be like, that's all right, they're all bad, but they're bad and they're good. Like, my natural reaction is like, that was all bad. What you did was all bad. There's nothing good from that. How in the world, and discipline them accordingly, apart from grace. So, and usually how our parents spoke to us becomes our self-talk. Generally, I think that's how it works. So if your parents were very affirming, then chances are you're going to have good self-talk, like, I can do this, I'm going to try hard, get back up, try again. If you received a lot of negative criticism or cut down, then chances are your self-talk is going to be more criticizing and more cutting yourself down. That doesn't have to be, but generally that's how our brains work, or if it's works are critical. So what do? How do we function? How do we bridge the good and the bad together? And there's really some important things for this, and they all kind of tie together with what we've previously talked about. But they are confessing our sin to one another, and forgiving. Confessing and forgiving, and then also integrating our negative emotions. So knowing how to deal with our negative emotions. So confessing and forgiving, and dealing with our negative emotions. James 5:16 says, confess your sins to one another and pray for each other that you may be healed. How cool that it says confess your sins to each other, one another, not only to God. Yes, confess our sin to God. Get Christ on the throne. That's a huge, of course, kind of thing. But confess your sin to one another is because this allows us to experience community, right? It allows us to be loved and forgiven by other people and restored. When we bring our bad into light. And even if you think about the sinner lady, when Jesus shows up at Simon's house, and Simon, like, the culture of that day is you would give that person a holy kiss, how they do in France, and you would help give them something to wash their feet. And you would take their jacket. It'd be equivalent to us today of like saying hello when somebody comes to your house, opening the door, taking their jacket, maybe even offering them something to drink. That's like our culture, that's our custom, right? So to not do that, to not even open the door for somebody, not even go over and greet them and say, hey, welcome to our house, or what, say hi, that's what Simon did to Jesus. So he didn't even acknowledge him at all. This great teacher is what they thought of him at the time. And so he's there, and of course the lady is crying, the adulterous woman, the sinful woman, is crying, because she's saying, how in the world, why are they treating him like this? She obviously had been touched by him, so she's crying, and finally she goes and uses her hair to wash his feet. All right, she uses whatever she has, her alabaster oil, she pours it at his feet, washes his feet, and what does Jesus do? He talks to Simon. Look at this woman. He's bragging about this sinful woman. Is that crazy? In front of everybody. And then kind of publicly it's you didn't even greet me. And yet this woman is making up for your lack of hospitality, your lack of love for me. He's restoring her to community. He's bragging about her in front of all these people. And that's what, when we bring our sin to light, it restores us to community. It allows us to to feel that love and acceptance from other people. So bringing our sin into light is kind of like taking our bad parts of us and bringing it to a place where it can receive healing. However, when we hide our bad, it gets darker, and things that are gross grow in the dark, mold, right? And it just gets darker and darker and darker. So sometimes we have a temptation to confess our sin to one another when there's victory, when it's finally like I've overcome, instead of when we're still in it, right? And sometimes we could discover, like when we don't want to like share our sin or our issues until it's all fixed because we want to be a good witness or whatever, but really like having it all together is not a good witness. Like going to Jesus when we don't have it all together is a good witness, right? That's what people need to see, is not like, hey, I've overcome, I've done it, you can do it too. It's like, I failed and I need Jesus, and you can need Jesus too. That's kind of where we're at. Is not seeing how victorious we are, but how victorious and forgiving Jesus is. So a couple nuggets in confessing our bad is to use discretion of who we confess to. That does not mean that we need to tell everybody, but make sure it's someone who loves Jesus, someone who loves you, and can offer grace. Because really, that's what is needed, is grace and truth over time, not someone that's going to hit you upside the head and be like, man, I thought we talked about this, you got to get it together, really, not that. Like someone that will remind you, like, Jesus died for that too, remember? That's what you need to hear. Be wary of confessing shallow things, Mark 7:21-22.
For from within, out of the heart of man, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, coveting, wickedness, deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, and foolishness.
Yeah. So these are the cancers to our soul. Like these are the things, rather than just like, oh, I didn't have a quiet time, or, like it'd be easy to admit the things that are kind of easy for us to admit. Whereas like this list is maybe the harder to like bring to light. There was a couple students involved in the ministry before us. They were like a year older, so I didn't really know them that well. They got married, and they were so neat. They had moved away. He was on the worship team, and they were just like such a neat couple. I think both of them were involved in leadership. And then I heard that he was even in a accountability group and everything. And it turns out he ended up having an affair, and they got divorced, and he left his wife. And it's just like, that's so sad. I mean, how did that happen? Like, he was on the worship team, he was involved, had an accountability group. But it turns out in his accountability group, he wasn't really sharing those things in that, his heart issues. He was just sharing the general, easy, overcoming things here. So be real, be open, vulnerable, instead of just like pretend vulnerable, like pretend, I'll share a little bit, but not really the real issues in my heart. So those are a couple little nuggets of confessing our bad. Okay, here's a story from the book I want to share with you guys. Owl came into the hospital because of explosive rage, and at unexpected intervals he would explode at anyone who made a mistake. The anger that would pour forth scared anyone, especially his children. In therapy, he confessed this intense hatred for his father. He had felt that as a Christian, he shouldn't hate his father. He had denied his feelings and had become two people. On one hand, he was a Christian nice guy. On the other, he was hiding his hatred. As he learned that the Bible did not condemn him for his hatred, he was able to confess it to others and to God and to find the real reason for it. In a small group, he was able to gain both understanding for the injuries that had caused the rage and forgiveness for wanting to get back at his father. As he was free to confess in an atmosphere of no condemnation, his dark parts began to get forgiven and healed. Al began to accept and forgive others when they failed. The way that his father had sinned against him was being transformed through confession. A second important, I believe this, yes. well, I think this is part of it. A second important ingredient to healing the good-bad split is forgiving others. Oh yeah, okay, this wasn't part of the story. Matthew 18:29 talks about our ability to forgive other people is based on our ability to accept forgiveness, because when we are trying to repay or earn something from God, then, or like our standing with God, then we are not going to be quick to forgive. We're going to be quick to demand that other people earn it too, just like we are. So we must be quick to forgive in order to receive healing, since you guys maybe have heard the unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Mm-hmm. So that's, no healing really can come from poison. So let's see. Our healing comes when we integrate negative emotions. So this is the next little part. So a lot of times it is easy to like hide your negative feelings, anger, sadness, fear. So let's look at each one of them. And the book talks about this, but anger. Okay, anger is our most basic emotion that tells us something is wrong. All right, we tend to protect the good that we don't want to lose. So anger is a signal that we are in danger of losing something that matters to us. So in Psalm 4:4 it says, "In your anger do not sin, do not let the sun go down while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold." So anger warns us of danger. It shows us something needs protecting, but we're not to sin in order to attempt to resolve whatever it is that needs resolved. But denying anger keeps us from getting the problem solved too, So either way, pretending like it's not there, or hiding it, or sinning to resolve it, either way is not how to get it done. So whatever it may be, let's see, anger may be protecting an injured vulnerability, a will that was controlled, or we may be under condemnation from someone and need to get out from under perfectionism. Whatever the source, anger tells you there is a problem. So we may discover that our anger is protecting something bad, such as pride, omnipotence, control, or perfectionism. Maybe we feel angry because we are losing control of another person. In either case, if we deny our anger, we can't get to the source. So anger is like a blinking gaslight of there is a problem. And so getting to the source of why am I angry? Is it because there really is something that needs to be solved outside of me? Or is it really because I have a heart problem of some sort? So when you identify anger, you can figure out what's wrong. And let's see. There was like a little acronym we talked about at a director's conference a few years ago, so I'm trying to see if I can remember what it was. MAD. So when you're mad, you can look at, M would be motives. You can look at what are my motives, what are other people, you can, and then A, so what are my motives? A is ask questions. So you can ask them, what was your motives, or why did this happen? So say a situation that you're driving down the street and some man yells at you for going too fast. I'm mad. Well, what are my motives? Well, I'm really just mad that he didn't think I measured up to his standard of perfection. Ask questions. I could ask him questions, but I already know that he doesn't want me driving past, over 50 miles an hour, and I know his reasons. And then D, don't assume. So when we assume things, it just makes all things worse. So that's a helpful acronym, what to do when you're mad, when you're angry, how to process through that. Okay, another one is sadness. Sadness signals hurt and loss. It helps us grieve and let go. If we repress sadness, we will inevitably become depressed. When people deny their sad feelings, they harden their heart and lose touch with the tender, grace-giving aspects the Bible describes. Describes these people as callous in Ephesians 4:19, or having lost all sensitivity. They become unable to love and be tender, or feel grief over their sin, and leads to being insensitive to people, and leads to a bunch of other psychological problems. So sadness helps signal hurt. All right, so don't reject sadness, but use it to what is the problem? Get to the problem of it. Last one is fear. Fear is a negative emotion that signals danger, either real or imaginary. But we must be aware of our state in order to work through it. If we're not aware of our fear, then we won't be able to make the choice to fear not and trust God, unless we identify that we are fearing. Denying fear keeps us out of touch with a humble position in the universe and keeps us away from God. For it's our fear and our lack of control over much of our life that leads us to a position of needing Jesus, right? Fear gets us in touch with our very real vulnerability and gets us in touch with our need for others and God. So looking at our fear, is this driving me to Jesus, or is this driving me to run away or isolate myself or what? Okay, some practical tips as far as bringing the good-bad split together is list the ways that you respond to the less than ideal. So what is your natural tendency? Is your natural tendency to deny it, deny the good, or deny the bad? Do you attack and judge when you see bad, or do you accept and forgive? Learn to accept the bad and weaknesses in others and yourself. So stay connected to others. When you see that they are less than ideal, you're going to begin to value that relationship. And oftentimes that's where the strength of a relationship comes from. I can't remember if I told you guys about this girl when we were on staff here that I would disciple. Did I tell you about her? She was real like standoffish, real unteachable, would sit back, kind of like, just see what you can teach me. I hated meeting with her. I hated it because it was just like I could do nothing to please her. But she was one of the student leaders, and I thought I was the women's director, and I had to, So it was just every week it was like, And I remember one time I was like, God, what do you want me to say? I just don't even know how to help her. I don't know what to do. Like I can do nothing right in her eyes. And God put it on my heart one time to share with her something I was struggling with. And that's terrifying, because it wasn't like something I received victory. And it was like, I'm struggling right now with this. And I'm going to share with this person that already hates me or something. I don't know. She treats me like she hates me. I was so scared. And I just thought, okay, I got to do it. I got to do it. Okay. So I shared, and she started bawling, like bawling, and was like, that's exactly what I'm struggling with, and it was just like, it changed our relationship. And now we are very, very close friends. I was in her wedding. I mean, it was like changed, and so it's once you see and are willing to accept the bad in another person, it bonds you like no other, and you guys probably have scenarios like that where somebody accepted the bad in you, or you accepted the bad in somebody else, and you got through it, So when we start demanding perfection and all good, then our attachment with other people increases. Instead of demanding that they cut things right or do things our way, then you can actually have like an intimate relationship with them instead of one that you feel like you're walking on eggshells. So it takes seeing ourselves and others through the cross of Jesus, he's the perfect one. Just knowing that no matter who we're around, they will not measure up to our standard, let alone God's standard, but we can see them through the cross of Jesus' perfection, Jesus is perfect on their behalf. They don't need to measure up. So having a Jesus died for that too mentality. And I think a tricky part is when people are not that way to you, and then being able to process through, well, that's a not good, It's not all good, but it's not all bad either, We're going to be knowing. Okay, so expect badness and weakness from everyone and everything. Ooh, crazy, right? Expect faults from creation. I remember one time we were at a soccer game. I can't even remember what happened. Something happened. And this guy goes, oh, it's almost like this world is broken. I was like, oh, yeah. Yeah, it is. Why would I expect nothing else? Of course it's broken. That's what comes out of this world, is brokenness. So expect faults and brokenness, that everything will eventually go wrong. The law of entropy, your car, your phone, your your house that you live in, the ministry that you're involved in, other believers, those people, that it's so easy for Christians to talk about those other believers that are so this. Like, of course they're so that. Like, we all are, like we need Jesus. That's the whole point. Just be careful when you are thinking something is all good. And remind yourself this is not all good. There is bad to this, and that's why we need Jesus. And then also expect that there is good from everyone and everything. And this is sometimes crazy to think about. In Cambodia, where this evil happens, I told you about that last week, right? Or did I not? I'm kidding. I told you guys. Okay. Cambodia is like, I think one of the most evil places on earth. It is awful. What happened is the Khmer Rouge came in, they killed everybody except the peasants. They killed everybody that was educated, all the spiritual leaders, anybody who was a leader and educated, and they put them in concentration camps. They had kids kill their parents to desensitize them. Kids were the ones at the concentration camp, the guards at concentration camps. I mean, awful. It was awful upon awful. Those kids are now the parents right now. I mean, this was not that long ago that this happened. And, most of the country was killed off. And so now it's just all these kids. And so what they do, they have drinking and gambling problems, so they sell their daughters to pedophiles for sex trafficking. There's a Sway Pak is notorious for the youngest girls sold. Little tiny 4-year-olds are sold to foreign pedophiles that come over. It's just evil. This amazing ministry, AIM, came in and they started a church, they started a school, they started all sorts of different things where they saw, I think, at the point we went, we took a girls' mission trip and then a everybody mission trip there a couple of years, maybe 5 years ago. And there was the church, they had just started it, it was 200 people. They had seen 30 brothel workers come to Christ, 2 or 3 traffickers come to Christ. At every service, they were like, do not sell your daughters. They just needed they didn't know it was wrong. They didn't know, they didn't realize that's not a good thing. So they have to teach them, God, that does not please God. Do not sell your daughters to pay your gambling debt or for alcohol or whatever, But it's changing, it's radically changing that little town. And then they also have SWAT teams that go in, are making arrests, and it's really, brothels have shut down. It's really, really cool what God is doing there. But I remember this one day at church service, these girls that have just been rescued, they were up there doing a little leading worship, singing this song, How Great Is Our God, in their Khmer language. And I was bawling. I was like, God is even here. He's even here, And right that afternoon, then we go to a concentration camp, and you saw what happened there in the pictures, and you see. And then actually right before going to the concentration camp, we were going out of our hotel, and there's this very, very young girl with this man who just came out of their room, and it's just when you're right there and you see, it's just the emotions were just, for a non-emotional person, was just too much, but it was then I had time with the Lord, and I can't remember if it was that morning or the next morning or something, but it was on a rooftop, and there was a pool, and there was flowers, and it was a gift, because that's one of my favorite things. And it was God is even here. He's blessing me and giving to me here in this most evil, darkest, most evil place. God is still here, and he's giving, and he's rescuing, and he's redeeming, and he's all of him. His kindness and his generosity is still here. It's not even though it is evil upon evil, there was good, and so it's, we just need to remember, even in the most horrible, God, you can't discount him. God is all good, and he's there, So in everything, it is not all good, and it's not all bad, God is still there doing his thing. So expect good everywhere. Okay, so let's take a minute to process, write down, and think through, what have you been seeing as all good or all bad? And then we'll have a couple other questions I'll throw out too. I'll reiterate them, I'll say them. So what have you been seeing as all good or all bad? What decisions have you made or are making based on thinking something is all good or all bad? And are there relationships that have been affected by you not having a good bad split?